Solve each inequality and graph its solution. The absolute value of 1 plus b is less than 1. That means our distance from 0 needs to be less than 1. For that to be true, what's inside our inequality needs to be between -1 and 1. Now we've created a compound inequality. We can solve this by subtracting 1 from all sides, and that leaves -2 is less than b is less than 0. So if I want to graph that on a number line, I would have a parenthesis on -2 and a parenthesis on 0 and shade everything in between. So that means if we pick any of those numbers in that closed interval, if we plug them in for b, it would be a true statement. Now let's look at number 2. The absolute value of 8x plus 8 is less than -64. So let's pause for a minute. That means our distance needs to be less than -64. If that's true, then that would make our distance negative, which is not possible. So if our absolute value is less than a negative, that means there is no solution because our distance cannot be negative, and therefore we don't shade anything on the number line. For number 3, we have absolute value of 3x plus 2 is greater than or equal to -3. So let's think about that. Our distance from 0 is greater than or equal to -3. Well, our distance is going to be positive, and a positive number is always greater than or equal to -3. Therefore, this is all real numbers because our absolute value will always be greater than a negative. So we would shade our entire number line. Any number we plug in there will give us a positive distance, which is greater than or equal to -3. So now here on number 4, we have a little bit more complex problem, but remember we start by isolating this absolute value. So I'll start by subtracting 5 from both sides, and I have negative absolute value of n minus 6 is less than -3. Now think about this as a -1 being multiplied by that absolute value. So I'll divide by -1 on both sides. And now I have absolute value of n minus 6 is greater than 3. So if that distance is going to be greater than 3, then what's inside our absolute value needs to be greater than 3, or what's inside our absolute value needs to be less than -3. To solve both of these, I'll add 6. N is greater than 9, or n is less than 3. So if I graph that on a number line, greater than 9 would be a parenthesis, shade to the right. Less than 3 is a parenthesis, shade to the left. So any numbers we pick in those intervals, if we plug them in, it will make a true statement.